NFL free agency is shaking up depth charts and creating massive opportunities for certain players. Now, some guys just won free agency while other players lost in a big way. In this video, we'll break down the biggest fantasy football winners from free agency and what it means for your 2025 season. Let's get into it. And we need to start with one of the biggest winners from free agency, and that's the former Steelers running back Najee Harris, who now finds himself on the Los Angeles Chargers after signing a one-year deal that's worth up to $9.25 million. Now, this is important for a couple of reasons. The veteran free agent market didn't have a lot of big names on it, with Aaron Jones getting re-signed by the Minnesota Vikings, and the fact that there's a highly talented rookie draft class coming in made a lot of these veterans on the free agent market not as valuable. So the fact that the Chargers were willing to put up over $9 million, almost $10 million to Najee Harris, albeit a one-year deal, shows that they're kind of invested in this guy to be their workhorse as of right now. Now, last season, the Chargers were a borderline top 10 team in terms of how many rushing attempts per game they had. And that was with a guy in J.K. Dobbins who came into the year kind of coming off of a couple of injuries. He got injured within the season itself. He wasn't durable, but now they bring in the most durable running back in the NFL the past 4 years. Najee Harris, you see this, 17 games played in all 4 of his seasons in the NFL, has never missed a game, 68 straight regular season games for Najee Harris, but that's not all, because he still has some juice left. He's only 27 years old, which is getting older for the running back position, but it's not like you're over the cliff. And he showed last year arguably his best year in terms of efficiency. He was top 10 in evaded tackles, top 20 in explosive run rate, top 20 in broken tackle rate. All these metrics for him were career best despite being 27 now. Now, when we look at the current depth chart, J.K. Dobbins is still a free agent, probably not returning to this team after Najee signed. Gus Edwards was released by the team, so it's currently Najee Harris and Kamani Vidal, who they didn't even really trust to give a big role last year as the RB3. Maybe they sign somebody in the NFL draft, although it does not seem as likely after investing heavily with Najee Harris' contract. He looks like a clear winner on a good offense to be a workhorse. And another clear winner to me is going to be the Bears quarterback, Caleb Williams. Look, they've done a lot of things this offseason to help their now second-year quarterback in Caleb Williams. They signed the best coach by a lot of people's standards on the market in Ben Johnson from the Detroit Lions. But not only did they improve their head coaching position and the play calling that Ben Johnson will bring, they also improved their offensive line dramatically. And this was a huge priority for the Bears coming into the free agency period, and probably still will be to some extent in the NFL draft, because their rookie quarterback Caleb Williams was sacked 68 times last year, 16 more than anybody else in the NFL. Now, part of this is because of the style of play that he has. He holds onto the ball a lot. He's a rookie, so processing wasn't there to begin the season as much, but also the offensive line was bad. But the Bears have been active in free agency in the trading period right now. They ended up trading for Joe Thuney, a guard who could play all over the offensive line for them. He comes over from the Chiefs, a very stable piece. Jonah Jackson, who has up and down seasons on his NFL career, another guard they traded for. And the big one was Drew Dahlman. They ended up signing Drew Dahlman. He's a center from the Atlanta Falcons. Drew Dahlman was the best center on the free agency market, was a top 5 center last year in run blocking grades, and only allowed 1 quarterback pressure all season. So you have an improved offensive line, and there's still some things they can do to improve it even more. So this is really good for Caleb Williams. If he has time to throw, mixed with some mobile upside, he should easily be around that top 10 quarterback mark in fantasy. Now, the next player we got to talk about, let's go back to the running back position. I mean, right now, Chase Brown's role for 2025 is looking absolutely fantastic. If you remember back at the NFL Combine, we made some videos on this. The Bengals and their general manager and coach, Zach Taylor, were expressing that they wanted to get some work off of Chase Brown's plate, bring in another running back, because last year, Chase Brown was averaging 24 touches per game during the second half of the season, and in some of those games, he got a little bit banged up. Okay, so now that free agency has started, what have the Bengals done? Well, beautiful people, I am glad you asked, because the Bengals are bringing back a former running back of theirs from past years in Samaje Perine on a 2-year deal, and it's up to $3.8 million. This is clear backup money, about $2 million, not even per year. And the reason why this is so important is because Samaje Perine, we know what this guy is. He isn't explosive. He isn't going to threaten to take a lot of carries in a backfield. He's just a reliable guy you could put out there on some third downs. In fact, Perine is 29 and a half years old. He's going to turn 30 this NFL season. It's not like he's some young, spry, explosive back, as I was mentioning. And if we look through his NFL career, right, 2024, we can scroll back. These are his carries per game according to Player Profiler, rush attempts, or just overall carries. Only 20 last year, 53, 95. You scroll all the way back, he hasn't had 100 plus carries in a season since his rookie year in 2017. It was his only season where he had over 100 carries. He's only gone over 65 carries 2 times back in 2022 and in his rookie year. This is not a guy who's going to see a big workload. He's going to come into pass protect on long down and distances sometimes and maybe be used in the 2-minute offense. So the reason why this benefits Chase Brown is because if they don't address the running back position in the NFL draft, and we'll talk about that more in a second, the only competition he has is Samaje Perine. Zach Moss won't be back with the team. Trevion Williams has been on the team for years now and has never made an impact. And then after that, there's not a lot of guys here. Khalil Herbert, Chris Evans, who knows if they'll be back with the team in terms of Khalil Herbert. So right now, it's Chase Brown and Samaje Perine as the sure things on this depth chart heading into next year. And honestly, I could see it being that. We've seen them go with Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon in past years. I think Chase Brown's in for a massive workload. And if we look at the Bengals draft picks as of right now, they're not going to take a running back with the 17th overall pick. They have much greater concerns. concerns. With the 49th overall pick, maybe they take a running back there, but if they truly value one Chase Brown, I don't think they do. I think you could see them take a running back somewhere in round 4 with the 119th pick or round 5 with the 153rd pick, and at that point, I'm not as threatened by the draft capital for one Chase Brown. Okay, now this next free agency winner, you're gonna have to stick with me a little bit because it's whoever the Dallas Cowboys end up drafting when the NFL draft comes. Now let me explain this. The Cowboys just went out in free agency and signed Javonte Williams to a 1-year deal for $3 million. In an offseason where most running backs are probably gonna sign somewhere between $5 to $10 million in the free agency period, Javonte only getting $3 million shows that he's a clear backup. Or at least that's how this team views him. And we already have word that Rico Dowdle, despite a successful season with a big workload, a lot of yardage totals, production, efficiency last year, he's not coming back to the Cowboys. He's probably asking for too much money, probably around $6 to $8 million a year. So right now it looks like Javonte Williams and Deuce Vaughn are the running backs on this team. So as of today, Javonte's the starter, but yes, the NFL draft is coming and the Cowboys have a lot of draft capital. I don't know what this ad is right here. Who is that? Who cares? All right. 12th overall. They have the pick 12th overall. If Ashton Genty falls here, I don't think he gets out of the top 10. You're going to see the Cowboys probably take Ashton Genty. But after that, they have so much capital. The 44th overall pick could easily be a running back in a loaded class. The 76th overall pick. I think one of these 3 picks will be a running back, and whoever that player is going to be the starting running back for the Dallas Cowboys, especially if it's that 1st or 2nd round pick, and they're going to immediately be a fantasy-friendly player. Now, the next player, we'll go back to the wide receiver position, who was a massive winner in this free agency period, is Brian Thomas. I mean, this guy was a massive winner as a rookie. He was a league winner in rounds 11th or 12 to 13 whenever you got him last year in fantasy. Hopefully you were watching this channel because then you got some Brian Thomas on your team. What about that for a little bit? Pat yourself on the back, Sal. I mean, people say, yo, Sal, you have a big head. Like, it obviously looks pretty big. But regardless, let's get back into this here. Liam Combs is now the new coach for Brian Thomas. So that started the positive news for Brian Thomas this offseason. I mean, you get a nice coach who had a successful year with the Bucs last year. But more recently, things have gotten even better for Brian Thomas in so many different ways. Let me explain. The Jaguars improved their offensive line by signing Robert Hainsey and Patrick McCarry. And this is important because they have one of the worst offensive lines in the league last year. Trevor Lawrence didn't have time to throw. Now he should. And not to mention, the Jaguars traded away Christian Kirk and they released Evan Ingram. So the target competition for Brian Thomas, as of right now, is really not there. If we look at it, at the wide receiver position, his biggest target competition is Gabe Davis, free agent signing for $10 million on a 1-year deal, Diami Brown, and Parker Washington. That's nothing crazy. His probably biggest competition in the middle of the field, Brenton Strange, a former 2nd-round pick out of Penn State, had some flashes last year when Evan Ingram was hurt. I think he's actually a talented player as well. But right now, there's not a lot out there. Maybe by the time you're watching this, they went out there and they signed Stephon Diggs or an Amari Cooper, which at that point, I'm not even worried too much about it. If it was Diggs, maybe a little bit coming off of a serious injury. I think the biggest piece of target competition you're going to find is maybe in the NFL draft, maybe they spend a 1st-round pick on a wide receiver, but outside of like the top 5 guys in this draft class, there's not a lot of guys I think can elevate and really take targets away from Brian Thomas. I mean, this is a guy in Brian Thomas who's coming off of a year where despite being a rookie, and he wasn't even known as the best or 2nd-best rookie in his class with Malik Nabers, his teammate, and Marvin Harrison Jr. coming out, he ranked 3rd overall in the NFL in yards. He had 10 touchdowns. He had 87 catches. I mean, just a standout year. He still has a talented quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, an improved O-line, an improved offensive coordinator and coach and play caller. You could see Brian Thomas lead the NFL in targets this year. And another guy who could be in the running for that same exact title, although more of an underdog to do so, would be Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's kind of a controversial player to have in this video, but I do believe he's an overall winner, and in general, his free agency was pretty tough. I mean, this guy lost his best friend on his team, his mentor, and his quarterback in Geno Smith. Let's dive into this. Because DK Metcalf was traded away, his best friend, his mentor Tyler Lockett was released, and as mentioned, Geno Smith, his quarterback, was traded to Las Vegas. But despite all this, here is why I believe Jackson Smith-Njigba is a winner. This dude, as of right now, and probably is going to be the clear-cut #1 receiver for the Seattle Seahawks. I think they're going to go to a much more run-heavy approach. When you look at the roster, Jake Bobo is currently the wide receiver too. I imagine a veteran, maybe an Amari Cooper, maybe a Stephon Diggs, ends up signing with this team, or they go out and get a player in the 2nd or 3rd round of the NFL draft. But either way, out of all those options I just mentioned, JSN is still the wide receiver 1 on this team. And in terms of the quarterback situation, I'd rather have Geno Smith. I think he's a better downfield thrower in general and playmaker, but Sam Darnold coming in on a 3-year, $100 million, $110 million deal, I believe it was. This is somewhat of a lateral move. You go from Geno Smith to Sam Darnold, same tier of player. Again, I think Geno Smith's highs are a little bit higher than Darnold's, but it's not a catastrophic situation. And as of right now, with just Lockett and Metcalf alone gone, the Seahawks receiving production is 1,592 yards lost and have to be somewhat somewhat replaced. I say somewhat because, of course, I think their play calling is going to change. I think they're going to be more run heavy. I think they're going to bring in some other pieces that are going to soak up a lot of those yards, but JSN is going to see a lot more stable production. Now, another player who was just like Brian Thomas, a rookie winner last year, is Jaden Daniels. Finished top 5 in fantasy production at the quarterback position, and he's had a great offseason. This guy just enters the league, dominates, gets to the conference championships, and now this offseason, everything's going well for him. Now, specifically this offseason, they brought back his tight end in Zach Ertz, who, despite being 34 years old, he was still a productive player last year. I mean, you go down to Zach Ertz's production, he ended up catching 66 balls for 657 yards. He had 7 touchdowns. He was basically top 10 in usage and slot usage and playmaking ability in terms of red zone usage. Everything was pretty solid. He was a reliable option for Jaden Daniels, and now he's back another year. But really, the most important part was what the Commanders did in the offseason in terms of trades. They traded for Deebo Samuel to be the wide receiver 2 on this team, replacing Diami Brown, and they traded for Laramie Tunsil to improve their offensive line even more. So yet again, Jaden Daniels is setting up pretty well. He's not going to be a 10th round pick anymore. He's setting up pretty well to finish as a top 5 fantasy quarterback again. Now let's talk about a little bit of a sneakier one here, because Christian Kirk is now a Texan. He goes from the Jaguars to another team in that same division for a cheap price point in Houston, just a 7th round pick. And now here's why this matters. Tank Dell is expected to miss the entire 2025 season with an injury for Houston, and Stephon Diggs is no longer on this team. He's coming off of a torn ACL, and he's now a free agent. So Houston's wide receiver room behind their stud receiver Nico Collins was lacking a lot. John Mechie showed some upside in very limited samples last year. Xavier Hutchinson basically showed nothing despite having plenty of opportunities, so they said, you know what, we have to go out there and get ourselves some Christian Kirk. And he fits this offense pretty well because he's a versatile receiver. He's shown as recent as last year that he can win on the outside, but he can also benefit a lot out of the slot. And specifically where I see this winning for Christian Kirk is in 2 wide receiver sets. He'll have less attention on him than Nico Collins, so that's nice on the outside. And in 3 wide receiver sets, he'll command that underneath route spot where Stephon Diggs was last year, while the defense is focused on Nico Collins downfield. Now, specifically, Stephon Diggs in that exact same role last year, being in on 2 wide receiver sets and being also in the slot on 3 wide receiver sets, he was a top 20 wide receiver in the NFL until getting injured last year in this same role. So Christian Kirk nowhere near as talented, in my opinion, overall, like the highs of the highs in his NFL career as Stephon Diggs, but I think he can slide into this role and be a top 30 fantasy receiver, and he's not going there right now, and he probably won't in the summer. Now, the next offense we're going to get into has 2 players who are actually fantasy winners, but before we get there, I have to let you know about the sponsor of the program today and the benefits you get from it, and it's Prize Picks. We've been partnered with them for up to 4 years right now, and here's the nice thing about Prize Picks. You can literally make some money, or at least get some action in right now on these offseason moves before a lot of the lines change. Brian Thomas, I'm taking for more than 1,124 yards based on the fact that he has no competition and there's no threatening competition coming in. We talked about that. And Nico Collins, Christian Kirk's his only competition right now. Nico Collins for over 1,200 yards. This is a guy who was doing that last year with much more tougher competition. I'm taking these two to combine them together. You can put $10 on it to try and win 30, 20 to try and win 60, but here's the very nice thing. Prize Picks is giving you beautiful people a free $50 to play with. There's a QR code on the screen or a link in the description below. All you have to do is sign up with code SAL23. You could take those plays I did or any other ones you want for the NFL season or any other sports. Just be sure to take advantage of it. Appreciate Prize Picks. Thank you for sponsoring this. They allow us to keep the lights on and do all this for you beautiful people. Take advantage of that free $50 with the promo code on the screen and the QR code. Now, the offense where multiple players on offense won was the Raiders. I mean, Geno Smith comes into the Raiders here. They trade for him. Tom Brady gets his quarterback. He's reconnected with his former coach, Pete Carroll. And the reason why this is important is there were some fantasy viable players here. Brock Bowers is a borderline first-round pick. Jacoby Myers has always been underappreciated in fantasy, and they just got a massive quarterback upgrade. Because Geno Smith last year was literally top 5 in the NFL in both big-time throws and top 10 in completion percentage. I mean, you could argue that he was a top 10 quarterback in the league, especially when he had protection, which is not something he had often with the Seattle Seahawks. So this is great news for the Raiders pass catchers. As Brock Bowers is going to be a 2nd or a 3rd round pick in fantasy, you can feel more secure about that pick compared to players going around him. And Jacoby Myers is once again a late round pick. He's going in like the 7th or 8th rounds as I look at this right now in early best ball drafts on Underdog. 7th or 8th round for the #1 outside and slot receiver at times for Geno Smith in an improved offense, somewhat improved offensive line. Tom Brady now involved in the organization. Pete Carroll to give you some culture. I like that a lot for Jacoby Myers. I mean, a lot. And I kind of like the situation for Justin Fields as well. I mean, he is going to be a starting quarterback this year. He signs a 2-year deal worth up to $40 million with the New York Jets to be their starting quarterback. You scroll over here, his guaranteed money was $30 million here. So this is enough of an incentive, and that's the key piece, this guaranteed money. It's enough of an incentive to kind of guarantee that he'll be the day one starter and have much more job security compared to when he was with the Steelers last year on a much cheaper contract. And look, Fields showed improvement both in passing and as a rusher last year with the Steelers. If that translates at all to the Jets this year and he's going to have more job security, he'll probably be around a top 12 quarterback week in and week out. Back to the wide receiver position, Hollywood Brown's going to re-sign with the Chiefs. He actually made, I think, $4 or $5 more million this offseason on a one-year deal. Now in 2024, he was basically injured the entire time. Second play of the preseason, he injures his shoulder, doesn't return until week 16 of the NFL season. But he's still just 27 years old with a proven track record of success. And when you look at his competition this year, I mean, Rashee Rice is coming off of a serious injury and has legal issues. Xavier Worthy now apparently has some legal issues as well. We have to see how that plays out. And Travis Kelce is getting a lot older and becoming less productive. So there's a world where Marquise Brown is going to go in like the 8th, 9th, or 10th round again, and maybe he can become a top 2 option for Patrick Mahomes in their offense this year. Another player who re-signed with his team at the running back position was Aaron Jones. And Aaron Jones, I mean, this just made way too much sense. He had an incredible first year with the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, if we want to talk about it and get him depth, he played in all 17 games for just the second time in his career. He had one of the quietest 1,500-yard seasons you'll ever see, and he's still a dual threat option with plenty of experience. And despite turning 30 years old last year, we still saw the explosiveness, the dual threat ability in the passing game. He was a red zone weapon for this team. I think yet again, he's going to be a solid option. Now, let me give you some quick hitters who are also winners, maybe just not as much as these other players. I think Devontae Adams is definitely a winner. I mean, compared to his previous situation, being a top receiver with Aaron Rodgers on the Jets, it doesn't change too much because he's still a number 2 receiver, but he does get maybe a quarterback upgrade in Matthew Stafford, definitely an overall offensive philosophy upgrade with Sean McVay in this Rams offense. And we were just talking about Aaron Jones in Minnesota, but how about their new quarterback? Because JJ McCarthy has had a great offseason. His main competition in Sam Darnold is now gone. They brought back Aaron Jones, as we were just talking about, but the big thing is their offensive line has only gotten better this offseason. They signed Will Fries, a guard, one of the best guards on the market, and center Ryan Kelly. And speaking of a quarterback who benefited from some offensive line moves, Lamar Jackson's a winner because the biggest thing, they needed to retain their left tackle, Ronnie Stanley. A ton of teams were coming after him for $20+ million a year, including their rivals, the Chiefs, and they did. They bring back Ronnie Stanley, who was a top 10 pass protector amongst all tackles last year, but not only that, they also went out there and signed DeAndre Hopkins, who is by no means the same DeAndre Hopkins as 3 to 4 to 5 or even 2 years ago, but if he's going to be the wide receiver 2 or 3 behind Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman, and assuming Mark Andrews is still on this team, this is a pretty solid depth wide receiver to have with a lot of experience, especially when it comes to first down, moving the change, and in the red zone. So these have been the biggest fantasy winners in free agency, and I should say so far, because technically free agency is going to last really up until the NFL draft and even beyond. So we'll update you all off season as well with any other big moves. Now, I appreciate you tuning into this video. If you're not yet subscribed, maybe it's your first time seeing me, make sure to hit the subscribe button. I'll be covering you all off season on the big NFL news that will impact your favorite teams, and also the big one here for fantasy football.